Recording.
Raise your hand if you know what movie that these pair of shoes are from. Alright, if you do know what movie these pair of shoes are from, then you know these are the self-tying Nike Air Mags that Marty McFly got in the movie Back to the Future. Now, when you saw these on the big screen, you might have thought about what it would be like to own a pair of these shoes. You might have thought about the benefits, you never have to tie your shoes again. You might have thought about some of the implications that would come with that technology. You have a lot of electronics in your shoe. Your shoes might catch on fire, that's never a good thing. And you might have thought about what it was like to live in that future, or in that scenario that they created. Now, without even realizing it, you've been exposed to a great example of design fiction. Now, in talking about design fiction, I'm going to go about it in a few different points. First off, I'm going to talk about what design fiction is. We're going to go over a few points, we're going to talk about how they correlate together, and then really, hopefully, give you guys a firm grasp of the subject. Then we're going to move on and we're going to talk about why it's important to us as graphic designers. Why do we care about design fiction? How do we apply it? Then we're going to go in and we're going to look at some examples from real designers and how they incorporate design fiction and how they use it. So to kick things off, let's talk about what design fiction is. Now, before I can talk about what design fiction is, I first have to define these three terms: scenario planning, critical design, and speculative design. Now, I'm going from the ground up here because scenario planning and critical design are the foundation for design fiction. And the reason I have to define all these is because each of these terms is a part of design fiction. So scenario planning, what we see, and what the book's definition, design storytelling, Lupton, what they give us, is that it's a tool used for telling stories about the future. But really, scenario planning is a lot more than that. Scenario planning is about building context and building the story in which our message or in which our design or object is being placed. Now, critical design is more of a way of thinking. It's our argumentative stance and what message we're trying to send with our piece. Now, when we move on to speculative design is the object, is our design that we're making. Now, in speculative design, we take observations from the current world and we make inferences about what the future could look like based on that. But in speculative design, we're basing it on near future. Where design fiction comes in is it encompasses all of this. Now, the book's definition of design fiction, or Lupton's definition, is that design fiction employs speculative products and prototypes to anticipate future trends. But I really don't think that does it justice. And the definition that I really like, I actually got from Davis Levine, and he's a service designer for the British Columbia government. And he wrote an article that was on the Medium.com, and his definition for it was that design fiction is the construction of a narrative, a movie, animation, written story, presentation, or installation to immerse an audience in an experience that provokes emotional and intellectual responses. It is the generation of ideas that are not yet possible to provoke a dialogue about what could be possible. Now, in thinking about this, I think the best way to explain it, or to let you guys think about it, would be go back to our example of the Nike Mags at the beginning. Now, the actual shoes themselves, think of that as speculative design. That is the object that's being placed. And then when we think about design fiction, think about the whole world that was created in order to make sense of that design. So we have scenario, we have them going into the future, they've created an entire world, and then we have the message trying to be sent by that individual designer, getting people excited about the shoes. Like I said, we're talking about what it would be like to have those shoes. And so that's how design fiction kind of incorporates together. Now, moving on, why do we care about it as graphic designers? Well, from day one, we've learned in here that design is storytelling. And design fiction is a tool that we use to enhance or to help us to tell stories. Now, how does it do that? Well, design fiction can assist with framing of our issue. So if you're having a hard time thinking about how to go about, or what your argument you're trying to make is with your design, kind of think about it in a future context. Take your problem and think about what the effects could be if you look years into the future. And looking at that, we can kind of frame our idea, and it helps us to think about things that wouldn't be possible. Also, it generates ideas of what we think to be possible. So when we're going about it and we're looking at these future scenarios and we're looking at these different things that we're going into, we're able to generate these ideas that nobody else would actually be able to think. We're able to generate responses from our audience that they wouldn't even be able to conceive had we not presented them with it, with our design. And thirdly, it just allows viewers to experience the object or design and think about the benefits, consequences, and implications of the idea as we do with the Nike Air Mags. When you look at this design right here, I really like this because I think it incorporates it very well. We see the lighter and we see the tumor gradually growing as it goes on, letting us know that as you continue to smoke, obviously the lighter is incorporated with smoking, as we can tell from the design. As you continue to smoke, the increased risk of cancer is there. And so it allows us to really think about the consequences. Over here we see it used in a spray can. On our phone today we have applications that you can mess with a color palette and you can adjust the different colors. In here we see that concept, but in an actual physical spray can. So imagine if you could adjust the colors on a spray can and be able to use that physically in real life. It's kind of a concept that we wouldn't be able to conceive, but because it's now there, we're now thinking about that. So the process they kind of go through in design fiction, like I said, we're making observations on current day, and then we're applying them to like future scenarios. So normally when designers go about this, they either go one or two routes with it. They either go utopian or dystopian. So utopian is of course a more prevalent future, kind of looking more on the brighter side of things. An example I use for this is the movie Passengers, where they go out into space on this super technological spaceship. And they have all these different inventions that they show throughout the movie. On a dystopian side, I use the film Idiocracy, if you guys know what that is. Basically, everyone in the movie is dumb and they ruin the entire world. And there's a lot of different designs that come out of a future with that scenario. So, when we're looking at what we go about it, context and narrative are very important, because context creates the stage and the frame in which we're putting our design, in which we're putting our prototype or object that we're trying to talk about. In looking at some actual examples of design fiction, we can look at some publications. Over here we see a magazine cover for the magazine Digit. Now obviously this is a utopian future. We're looking at our technological advances and we can see the next gadget is you, and he's wearing the technology, and we can see how they're envisioning technology going into the future. When we look over here, we look at a less technological side of things and we look at it being used in publication design to tell a story. So in this cover we can clearly see the cool dad generation. Obviously it's the older generation kind of hating on millennials, saying that we're not responsible enough to be able to raise kids, and then they're creating a scenario in which we're seeing the future kind of play out, and we're envisioning a negative future in which we are raising kids. And that kind of just gets people's minds turning and gets them thinking about different aspects. Now design fiction is applicable to a lot of different areas. One thing they used in is prototypes. A lot of times companies will use this to be able to see into the future and come up with different products. Philips Norelco actually has an entire team dedicated to future designs to possibly come up with what they could have in the future. Two of the things that I saw that really interested me are the mobile router / light post. This thing that they have on their website, they actually have an entire story made up for it, in which they create a scenario in the future where we're so overpopulated that we have to create space in any way we can. So by combining telephone poles and light posts into one thing, you can boost your cell phone signal and they serve as light posts. We're limiting space and you can see the functionality of it. And now we're thinking about a possibility in the future in which that's possible. Over here we have the food copier. Of course we know world hunger is a large problem. This is their take on how they could fix that. The story behind this is that it's able to copy the products and physical, like atoms of food basically, and be able to recreate them. Some design fiction that's actually come true. How many people here remember Google Glass when that came out? I think it was 2011 the prototype came out. Now, this thing was supposed to be able to do a lot of different things. Basically, you're supposed to be able to interact with the world. It could pull things up when you look at it. You could talk to it. It couldn't really do a lot of those things. And as a result, a lot of people were disappointed with the prototype. And we thought Google Glass would make a comeback in 2018 because that's what they talked about. But according to Google.com, they've actually moved on, and the technology that's in Google Glass is now available in Google Lens. Google Lens is an actual application that you have, and it basically does everything Google Glass was supposed to do. Now you might think, why not go back to Google Glass? Well, we talked about how when you put out a design product, you're gauging an audience's reaction to it. When Google Glass came out, there wasn't a lot of reaction to it. People weren't too excited about it. People thought it was kind of weird that you wear them around. But people love things on their cell phones. And so we see how they took the information from that prototype and applied it to current today. Over here we see the Nike Air Mags. Of course we know that's from the movie, but in 2015, because that's the year they came back to, Nike actually did a special where they created those shoes. And they are self-tying. It's actually really cool. There's a whole process with that. And then when we look at it at the broader scale, we realize that design fiction is everywhere around us. When we look at movies, we like WALL-E, where they're talking about where we destroy Earth and we go onto a ship, and they're looking at this dystopian future where we can't even get out of chairs and we're so obsessed with our screens. That's playing on current observations from today's time, kids always being obsessed with their screens and us not caring about the Earth. We also see it in older movies such as Blade Runner. It's been around for a very long time. So as I kind of wrap things up today, I want you to remember three things. One, design fiction encompasses a lot of things. It aims to provide a dialogue about what could or should be possible and allows us to kind of view things in a different way. Design fiction is also a tool used to enhance our storytelling. As we know, design is storytelling, so in using this tool, we're able to create speculation into possible future situations and relay messages that we couldn't had we not been able to use this tool. And third, design fiction is used everywhere. Whether you realize it or not, you've been affected by it, and you've been thinking about it, and we've seen it throughout our entire lives. So, with that being said, thank you all for listening. Maybe now you can use design fiction to improve your storytelling.